Hello and welcome. My name is Ken Peterson. This is the first of a two-part series hosted by MasterControl, advancing beyond CAPA compliance and using innovation for improvement and growth strategy. I'm going to be your host, and as we look at what's been working for most companies in a regulated environment currently, CAPA is working well. But what are the next steps as we go beyond compliance and drive towards successful improvements? Let's take a look at how organizations should be looking to innovate and implement these new inventive ideas to bring practical economic growth for those organizations. Why is the first question. Why do we not have more innovation? It seems to stand to reason that as we look at compliance, as we look at solving problems, logic and reason, and we compare that to innovation and creativity, oftentimes innovation is a little bit more messy. It's a little bit more difficult for engineers and production and operations people to look at how they can break through and come up with new ideas. We're going to examine a process today in this webinar that has the ability to add analytical thinking, combine that with creative thinking, such that we can come up with new ideas and put them to work in our organization. But we need to key in on one key thing, and that is that in the past, we've tended to rely more on an investigation mindset. We cannot let that take over our innovation mind. As we think about quality event management, is it in opposition to innovation? Well, CAPA is about investigating, finding the root cause, and coming up with an answer, having a solution. Innovation, however, is more about how do we design and look into the future, invent, and exploit new ideas to bring to pass practical results for our organizations. Compliance versus improvement. What should we do? The first thing we want to do is understand the process. The process, if you think about CAPA, primarily its origin is in the past. It's a reactive process. Something has gone wrong generally. We've had an input from a nonconformance, a deviation, an audit finding, an out of specification in the laboratory, and we need to find a solution to that. If we think about innovation, however, the origin is primarily focused in the future. What we're really trying to do is come up with new ways to do something wherein even the past may not be that important. And here is where we sometimes get the conflict. If you think about innovation, oftentimes we don't really care exactly what happened in the past because we're going to find a whole new way of doing it. Therefore, the past might even be meaningless. And that strikes a foul with quality folks oftentimes. Quality event management in CAPA, some of the lessons that we've learned. The first wave we learned with our CAPA process that oftentimes we were overloaded. We had poor risk management, and our filtering process for putting those items into the CAPA process wasn't always spot on. And so we overloaded and took way too many deviations or other quality events into the CAPA process in the beginning. We didn't have a good exit system. And so with a faulty exit system, we oftentimes selected the wrong actions too. We didn't know when to look at a containment or a correction instead of a corrective action. And so it made it difficult to run the business based on that faulty exit system. And then lastly, the action selection could really then throw a monkey wrench into the whole process, because obviously if we're not looking at it based on core risk criteria, then the finish line that we achieve could be the wrong place. For example, if a correction is all that's needed and we move towards a corrective action, there's a lot more effort involved in that than just containing the situation through a correction. As we think about the quality event management process, and you look at what you see here on this slide, you can see that the red items represent the quality events or the feeders into the system. Down below that quality event feeder system, we've got in that diamond a typical risk-based issue review process, wherein that the upper right being red would indicate that these are items that have entered in that have a higher risk score. And we had a scoring process in that issue review to let us understand better whether it was a green, yellow, or red color coding, with again, red being that which was the most significant or had the highest impact. And then these arrows, they tended to put us in the right direction based on the score of that particular quality event. If it was not that significant, we closed it out quite immediately. And if it had more significance in that lighter orange color, we would then primarily deal with it using containment or a correction strategy. If it had significant impact, we then ran it in for initiation into the CAPA process, an investigation, did the root cause analysis, and then had a corrective response to that cause, in addition to preventive action, effectivity checking, and then watching it or tracking and trending it as we then close the incident. With that in mind, I think it's helpful as we then look at the parallel with what we're going to try to talk about today in terms of invention, innovation, and some of the lessons learned from the quality event management process, the scheme of moving from step A to B to C, which gets us to D, and D then is a good place. The first way, poor risk management. We found that early on. CAPA overload, faulty exit system, and faulty action selection. Now, if we contrast that with quality improvement, we need to remember that quality improvement is not deviation management. However, we, in this case, oftentimes are finding poor gain management. So in the past, when we looked at compliance, we didn't have a good way to determine what the impact was. Here we're going to need to determine what the gain will be or the benefit before we spend resources, time, energy, and effort to come up with new solutions. Also, we need to work outside the CAPA system if we are going to be successful. We've learned that putting improvement in the CAPA system is oftentimes a surefire process for failure. Faulty exit system. When do we exit and know that we've achieved that which is going to be the best for getting the gain or exploiting that particular benefit based on the impact or the consequence that we've been trying to achieve? We need to have a better understanding of what that finish line is so that we get the right opportunity to the right stage of development. And then lastly, we're going to look at some new actions. Some actions that are a little bit different than what we might be familiar with in compliance and CAPA. And I think we'll have a good time with these new actions and the selection of them. So, sourcing your entrance, knowing your finish. Those are two key ingredients when we contrast what we've done before in the past and what we're about to talk about with a focus on improvement and the future. The actions that we'll introduce will be a carryover with prevention as we look at it in a slightly different way, and then introduce two new actions, facilitative and exploitive, as we examine more the benefit side of the equation. Friends, future. We've got to remember we're focused on the future. So with that now, let's introduce these actions. Preventive, of course, you understand what that is from past experience in the CAPA process, decrease the probability of occurrence. We want to make sure that we drive that probability down so that we have much less opportunity for that problem to occur. And within the innovation side, there will be latter stages in the process where we will try to debug the innovation using prevention in a slightly different way. However, the definition does not change. It will still be associated with risk and trying to decrease the probability of occurrence. Facilitative. Increase the probability of occurrence. Now think about it. If we're trying to bring an opportunity or something positive to bear, we don't want to decrease that. We want to increase the probability of that. And so facilitative action will become a primary action as we move that innovation forward. And if we can't increase the probability of the occurrence, then it tells us that we've got some trouble spots that we're going to have to better understand. Now, for me, perhaps the most enjoyable that we'll talk about today will be exploitive. Interesting that authorities have chosen that word, and I think it is the right word. But exploitive means to take advantage or leverage new solution. Now, as we look to exploit this, we want to think about in terms of the market, in terms of the competition. How do we drive the competition out? How do we take our market and increase our share, for example, such that we have a lock on it? Or how do we take a new patent and exploit it in a way that it drives benefit to our affiliatory products and services? This is the kind of thing that we'll be looking at with exploitive. From a gain management, risk management profile, I'd like us to think about this chart. Remember, with compliance and CAPA, the red represented significant risk. Now, what we've in essence done is we've flipped that chart such that the green now is in the upper right, and we're talking about gain. And so what we're going to really focus upon then is the increasing the probability and the impact. If we can have an opportunity identified, then we're going to facilitate that opportunity, do everything we can to make it happen, and when it does, we're going to exploit that impact. However, if we don't have a green element in that what we've got is an impact or a benefit that's significant, that will bring about critical results for our organization, why would we want to then spend significant resources to go out and try to realize that? So the concept still applies here in the sense that can we make it occur in terms of probability? And if it does occur, does it bring the impact that we need from an innovation standpoint or from an opportunity score? So we'll be looking to move forward on those that score in the green with great energy. Those in the yellow, we may use some more simplistic approaches with less resource. And honestly, if it scores in the red, that's really telling us it's not a good opportunity to chase. Our time may be spent somewhere else more effectively. Solution deployment. If we think in terms of the solution here, and we look at how to drive that solution towards that high impact and convert it to an exploitive action, in essence, what we then have done is increase the leverage or benefit of the solution. And that needs to be the thinking process for how we move forward into the innovation process. So let's look at a picture of it. Just as we saw with the CAPA process, there's great similarities. What we've got are feeders. Those feeders might come from changes or threats or a potential problem. It could be from an audit. It could be from market demands or past successes. We'll look at different kinds of feeders that will bring opportunities forward for us. We'll take those opportunities into this diamond that's right below there, and there you can see then the red, yellow, green scale. We're going to focus on those which score out more towards the green side, meaning they have significant impact. However, if it's in the yellow zone, we might want to look at something that's a little less rigorous and close that improvement following that arrow up to the green box without as much energy in the process. However, if it has significant improvement, then we're going to go through a process, a step-by-step sequence of events that will ensure that we'll be successful, similar to what made us successful with compliance. The thing I like about this is because it is a methodology, we've found that those engineers, R&D people, operations people, quality people, they respond very well to it. They don't dive under some table and say, ew, this is too strange, this is innovation, this is only reserved for those that are creative. No, they've learned that if they'll follow this process, it will get them where they need to go. And having a roadmap is very important for some of us logical thinkers trying to move towards being creative thinkers. So we'll look at a process to improve and innovate. We'll look at actions in terms of facilitative, exploitive, and how we can bear those and bring fruit from them. We'll look at effectivity checks. That's actually an important part of the innovation process too, to make sure that what we're doing is on the mark. And we'll look at how to design our solutions, bring back the requirements that were earlier set, and apply those or modify the solutions so that it can be put to practical economic use to make us money or to improve a process. And then, of course, we'll watch it to make sure that we get the results that we're looking for. So, as we understand this, we are going to focus a little bit more during our time together on these two to the right. We'll be looking at primarily innovation, creation, coming up with new ideas and putting them into that process. And we might even push the envelope a little bit with some breakthrough thinking and some invention. And there are some great tools that we can use to better understand how to use these almost immediately out on the job. But let me give you a couple of examples. I think oftentimes an example is a good way to get a sense of where we might be going with this. The first one, increase the throughput of a line 20%. Improvement. That's based upon some vision that a particular person may have or need to have. Perhaps it's being driven by competition, being driven by new equipment that we're bringing in that has capacity. So it's not necessarily driven through compliance or a quality event that may have occurred. Another one might be to redesign the lab bench to accept a new piece of equipment that's coming on board here in the next few weeks. Another one might be to prevent label failure on a line due to a planned increase in run speed where our production throughput is going up. So here we might be looking at debugging and making sure that we look at how to prevent future problems from occurring. But what you'll notice is that all these have a future orientation. We're focusing on trying to get something to happen that's going to be beneficial for us, bring significant impact, and worthy of putting resources into the effort. One that I had a lot of fun with not too long ago, quite recently, is we looked at increasing doctor satisfaction in a in-service as we looked at instructions for this new dental x-ray gun. And that was an interesting little project. We'll be using that as an example a little bit in the future here. And then inventing new component to transfer energy through a pediatric bed during surgery was an interesting application that we recently worked on. So with these, let's get right into then the innovation steps and how we might be able to use this process to come up with new ideas and put those to work in your business. It really boils down to a couple of key elements that we're going to follow. The first one is opportunity identification. And we'll talk about each of these individually, give you some techniques, some tips, and some applications so that you can go back after this webinar and begin to apply this and practice it on your job. The second one will be what we call scope and better understanding the parameters that will go into this opportunity if we are to succeed. The third will be to look at requirements. What is necessary for that success to work within the department, within the product line, within the design and the scope that we may have established just moments before. Then we'll look at improve. We'll give you some new ways to come up with new ideas, some techniques, so that you can invent new ways to get things done. And this will then bring forth idea generation as well as ways to move through even when you're stuck and cannot come up with ideas. Refine. How do we make sure that we have a solution that will actually work? And then sell. How do we present that to those that need to buy off on it, whether it be management, whether it be customers, whether they be suppliers? We'll look at how we can sell effectively to gain support for our innovative ideas. Let's start with the first one. Understand the opportunity. Well, the first thing we need to do is to find an opportunity to identify. So many times we're so busy just working through and trying to solve problems and make sure that we meet deadlines and meet production goals and make sure that we're safe and that we don't step out too far and we're compliant, that we really don't look for opportunities. Where do we go if we want to enhance our market, or if we want to improve our operations, or if we want to make the product better, or come up with new ways to expand our process or leverage the process we have? How do we use technology better or use our customers better? These are some places that we can go to start to look if we want to understand where opportunities come from. We could look at trends. We could look at threats. We could look at changes in our process or past successes. All of these are good places to start to examine what might be an opportunity. But the key to this is to think about and to start to be more attentive to that which is going on around us. When you read the newspaper, when you listen to the news, think about what other organizations are doing and start to apply it to how that might work in our operation. With regard to opportunities, once we've identified an opportunity, we then want to think in terms of scope. A couple things to think about when we look at scope is we're really primarily looking at what are the boundaries that we need to focus within. And this is not requirements yet. This is still broader. But if we need to recognize something by the end of the year, or we need to make sure that we involve all the employees, or we need to make sure that it doesn't get in the way of a new product going forward successfully with a launch that's coming up soon, we're going to start to look at what is the broader scope in terms of that opportunity that we may have uncovered. A couple of do's and don'ts. First off, do consider the scope to provide direction. It should add focus to the eventual solution. We don't want to allow the scope in this early stage to overcome our innovative thought and to get in the way or hinder new ideas. We will reintroduce the scope dimensions later to refine and adjust the final solution along with the next step, which is requirements. What do we mean by requirements, and why are they important? For many who've worked in R&D areas, design requirements have guided their effort towards new ideas, and they understand just how important they are in terms of providing for focus, in terms of helping to refine the solution later. One of the examples that I like to share is Thomas Edison. Great inventor, a lot of new ideas, one of the best. And I oftentimes think about one of his most significant inventions, which was the light bulb. Edison understood how to identify an opportunity, how to scope it based on what the customer needed, what the market wanted, and what the future of this product could be. But then he also refined it into requirements. How many hours did this need to burn? What was the parameters in order for it to be successful? Edison said that because of the requirements in the scope, he was able to focus his energy after many trials and some tribulations and come up with a successful, long-lasting power source called the light bulb. I like to think that if he hadn't, maybe he'd have come up with the flash bulb. So we can see here how focus is important. Kennedy was another great one. Kennedy said, with the opportunity clearly set in mind, that we're going to put a man on the moon. Where did that come from? It came from a threat. The Russians were there before us. He saw the great advances with science that could be realized if we could find our way into space. And with that clear focus, he was then able to start to get NASA to look at requirements needed to put a man on the moon. And within a few short months, we not only had a man on the moon, we had a parked car, we had a golf ball, we had the American flag posted, and we were the first there, of which a lot of countries then used that same model to move them into space. And so while innovation, it's important to get out in front, oftentimes to realize those gains. Sometimes that's not critical. What's most critical is understand what is it we're trying to accomplish and do it within the time frame that is best for us. The next step Improve. And this is where we're going to slow down a little bit and really take some time to see if we can't help you come up with some good techniques that will allow you to then drive some improvements in your organization and perhaps even some minor breakthroughs. Develop an improvement objective is the first step. Now that should not be too difficult if we already understand what our opportunity is we're trying to chase and we have a good focus through scope and requirements. But we want to visualize the end result. We want to consider questions such as these. What will that solution look like? Can you envision that? Additionally, how will this make things better? How is this going to drive success and bring benefit and impact that's significant to your organization, department, or customer? What will change or have to change as a result of this improvement? And remember, your scope will most certainly help you to construct a complete objective. Let's talk about constructing a good objective. What should it include? First off, you want to be able to articulate what is it that you want to accomplish that. Articulate that in a sentence or two that's very succinct and allows the person that sees it to understand precisely what your vision or your goal is. Where will it be done? And how much will it need in terms of resources and effort might be considered as well in terms of this. When will you expect to finish it? Do you have a time horizon or a time frame that you can attach to this? Most importantly, remember this, that when Kennedy said, we are going to put a man on the moon, he didn't know how we were going to do that. He sent that clear objective for improvement over to his team, and he brought the energy and the expertise and the vision into reality as they all worked together to determine how they were going to do that. His job was to create the clear vision of intent. Edison was a little bit different. He had his vision, and then he became the team and worked with all his passion and energy to accomplish that. I have a great respect for an author, Michael Mercado. He's written some great books. You can see a couple of them here on the slide. But one of the things he said that I have admired for years, and that is that creativity does not depend on intelligence. It depends on how well you've trained your mind to be creative. So let's take a look at that, and I believe that that is absolutely true. If we consider where we found the new solution, if we consider how these ideas have come forward, if we consider that we're going to now need to think outside the box a little bit and train our mind such that our mind can be creative, or more importantly, not just creative, because the last thing we need is just a new idea that's rather cumbersome or almost impossible or difficult to implement. We need to work all the way through the process, not only innovative thinking, but critical thinking, and apply that analytical thinking with the innovative thinking. If we can train our mind, given it a process, a series of steps that allows us to have the techniques inside each step to be able to accomplish that, we can come up with some very wonderful, incredible solutions that we can put to practical economic use in our company. Let's talk a little bit about the mind and how the mind works, so we can understand some of the things that we're going to use. First off, the mind channels information, and it channels it in what we call range and depth. So friends, range is the bandwidth. It's having the ability to expand our thoughts and to look at that width. Depth is going to be the ability to dive, to go down and find things in that diving process that we never thought existed, to be able to uncover things that allow us to have new ideas that we never thought before we could find. But we need to be able to apply both range and depth if we're going to successfully channel our minds. I want to give you an example. And I'm going to try something a little bit different here. What I would like you to do is you can either grab a piece of paper or you can just think here. I'm going to give you 25 seconds. It's not a long time in a webinar. It may seem a bit of time, but I want you just to think of as many bird names as you can. To kind of get you started, I've put a few examples up here, but there's not a right or wrong answer. I just want you to write down as many bird names or think of as many bird names as you can. And I'm going to put you on a 20-second clock here. Five more seconds. Stop. If you wrote them on a piece of paper, count them up. If you just mentally thought of it, try to get a fairly precise estimate. Our experience is that most people come up with between 10 and 14 names. How did you fare? Maybe some a little better, some a little worse. That tends to be average. Now I want you to look at your names, or I want you to think about your names. And I want you to think about this concept that I introduced a moment ago of range and depth. If we read those names, what we'd oftentimes find is range is shown by having different types of birds. For example, you might see, if you had written them down, songbirds like robin, canary, parakeet. You might have 2 or 3 or 4 birds all clustered in a row that we might be able to put a category there of songbirds. And the songbirds would represent a type of bird in the range of birds that we could look at, with the depth indicated by how deeply you went into that type of bird. So if you had 3 birds in there or 4 birds in there, way to go. You are abnormal. Okay? Most people have one range classification, the next range classification, so they'll have songbirds, and the next thing will be eating birds, and maybe they'll get 2 birds, such as turkey and chicken. And then maybe they get another type of bird, which will be large birds, and maybe they're going to have ostrich and stork and dodo. So these would be then range versus depth. If we're going to use the mind effectively as we open some of these improvement thinking techniques, we are going to need to be able to push the button on the channel frequently. If we get stumped, we're going to need to push the button and move to another channel. Some of those channels might be rather ridiculous. Maybe I want to look at prehistoric birds or bird names. Bird names might be Henry and Ken and John and Peter and Sally and Sue. And you say that has nothing at all to do perhaps of what I'm trying to focus on. However, we use those as chances to clear the mind and to be able to refocus. We're also going to drive, and we may bring people in to help us drive, down those channels. Now, of course, we're going to use it more in an applied way with real examples that make sense in the life science industry, and we might be looking at medical devices and pharmaceutical products and services and nutraceuticals. We've got a few fun examples planned, but we will use this concept of range and depth as we move forward into those examples. As we look at this improved stage, we've come to the end of our first part or session on innovation and growth. I would like to welcome you to join us again as we look at the second session, wherein we will actually introduce several interesting techniques that you can use to come up with new ideas, to work that improvement process forward. We'll also be looking at how to design the solutions in the second stage, as well as refine them, bring forward any risks and eliminate them, and put together an outstanding sales presentation that will make it easy for those that have to buy off on them to accept them. My name is Ken Peterson. I've had fun sharing these few concepts with you because MasterControl is interested in your having this information and it helping you and not being just some kind of academic exercise for you. They have also asked me to mention to you that we have filmed both sessions. Should you want to have session 2 and look at it right after this session, please contact MasterControl. They'll make sure that you receive it. Thanks again, and I look forward to speaking with you again as we look at the continuing parts of the innovation and growth process.